This lab session we will be working towards what you see here. This is building upon our last lab session where we created a simple menu system and a pop-up menu. Now in this session we'll be adding some cool menu icons, as you see here, and you'll notice that there are shortcuts, or what we call accelerators really, next to certain menu items. So for instance, a popular accelerator in document editors such as this would be Control and S if you're on the Windows operating system, and Command and S if you're on a Mac. And this is suggesting that this will take you, or at least execute the save operation that's attached to that menu item without even navigating through the menu. So it's quite convenient to add accelerators to your menu items. In addition to that, we'll add mnemonics to our menu items, and mnemonics are usually activated, or at least applied on the menu itself, the top level menu itself. On Windows, mnemonics are triggered by the Alt key. So there'll be Alt and F basically for the activation of the file menu. So I just pressed the Option key and the F key on the Mac, and that revealed certain mnemonics. So the moment I hold the Option key down, you'll notice that there's certain letters that are highlighted in the menu items themselves, and we're going to set those up as well, just for convenience purposes, of course. In addition to that, we'll be creating a Toolbar. Now this toolbar, as you see here, it may look a little different depending on the operating system, but this toolbar adds again another level of convenience when working with applications such as these. It provides access to the most frequently triggered options, such as for instance new, open, save, etc. Now typical to toolbars, they're usually iconified. Basically, they have iconic representations of the action. So part of this session, I'll include an archive of icons that we'll be working with. So you'll notice also that toolbars, just in case the icons aren't clear enough, they contain tooltips. So we'll be adding those tooltips as well. So this is basically going to be our objective. You'll notice that in Java, the default toolbar, we can actually move it around, position it, to the top, to the south, left, or right. In addition to that, there's a minor modification that we'll make. This here is our text size, and the original incarnation of our text size options allowed us to select multiple items at the same time. But we're going to add a button group to ensure that only one item is selected at a given time. So those are basically the simple additions that we'll make in this particular session. So let's get to that. Alright, so what we need to do is we need to find our working directory, a working NetBeans project directory. On my machine, since I have quite a few versions of what we're working on, I'm going to enter into my JavaTextEditor 2, which is our current source. And I'd like you to place the images.zip that's provided inside of this working directory. Just decompress it so it has it's contained within a folder named images. And within the images, you'll notice that there are certain GIF icons that we'll be referencing later on in our source. So this is the first step. Add the images to your working project directory, as you see here. And once we have those images in place, then we need to proceed by opening up our existing project. I'll just close this down. This is the objective. So we'll open up our existing project, specifically the UI class, because we won't have any need to modify the main class itself. So we'll work with our UI class, and one of the first things that we'll do is we'll add a button group, just like I mentioned, to our items, okay? So we're going to add a button group so that only one of these items is selected at a given point in time. We begin by adding an actual class called the button group class. We just create a reference with a common B. And once we add this button group, linking these radio button menu items to the button group is quite simple. We just add that particular item to the button group instance. So you'll notice that I've added these two lines here. Okay, so you just go ahead and type those in, create the button group at this line, and then under the first menu item, radio button menu item, you just put this statement in, button group dot add small text option, which is a reference to this particular radio button menu item. All right, and we proceed by doing the same thing on this second radio button menu item, button group dot add medium text option, and we do the same thing on the third, button group dot add large text option. So once this is in place, you'll find that only one option will be selected at a given time, and this is what we desire. All right. So again, feel free to pause the video at any point in time to transcribe the changes that we're making. All right. So the next thing that we'll do, we'll proceed to add our mnemonics. So like I mentioned to you, mnemonics are good for conveniently triggering or expanding menus in a menu system. So they're usually applied to top-level menus, right? And those accelerators that I mentioned also, they're applied specifically to the menu items. But first we'll take care of the mnemonics. So we'll add a line of code here already that looks like this. So on our file menu reference, we'll call the setMnemonic method, and we'll specify the key event that should trigger it. Now, the key event is a convenience class in Java, and there are a bunch of static, there are a bunch of constants that represent certain keys. Now, what we're specifically saying here is that we are going to set up a mnemonic trigger on the F key for this particular file menu item, or rather, file menu itself. All right, so it's simply just calling setMnemonic on the file menu instance and specifying which key event will trigger it. All right, so here is it again. So we're gonna do that on all of the menus. Now, here's an example of setting an accelerator on a menu item. Now that's a bit more code, but I'll break it down for you. The menu item itself has a method called setAccelerator, and these accelerators are usually key combinations such as Control and S, Control and X, etc. If you're on the Windows and so on. So the accelerator takes a couple of arguments. So we're still using the key events eventually, but you'll find that it's wrapped up in a lot of other calls. So right now we want to send to the accelerator enough information for it to understand the key combinations, and for that we use the keystroke.getKeystroke method. And that keystroke.getKeystroke method basically informs that there is going to be a particular key combination trigger that will denote this particular accelerator for this particular menu item. And the trigger would be the pressing of the N key, all right, along with the control key. So you'll notice how this is set up here. The key event will be in the individual keys, and the action event will be other accessory keys such as control, shift, etc. All right. Now this is basically going to be translated according to the native operating system's equivalent of the control key. So for instance, like I mentioned on the Mac, this will be translated into the command key instead. All right. So this particular combination of method calls and arguments would set up an accelerator as you've seen there to allow us to press Control and N so that we can trigger the action associated with this particular menu item. Now there aren't events set up as yet, but you'll imagine that when we set up these events, it'll directly trigger the particular event that's associated with the menu item. All right. So we'll continue onward and add that to all of the other menu items, such as the open. You'll notice that there's a slight difference with the key that's related to it. Instead of N, there's O. All right, VK underscore O represents O. So you can safely put Control and, or at least use the key combination Control and O to open or trigger the open action. All right. We'll add another accelerator down to the save. So instead of O, we'll use S to trigger on Control and S or Command and S. And we're going to add a mnemonic for our edit, which will be triggered under the E key. All right, so we can safely put use the Alt and E combination to trigger the edit menu, to expand that edit menu. We're going to add accelerators under its items as well in a similar fashion. The undo key, it's sort of universal to have the undo keystroke combinations involving Z. So whatever control mask that the operating system has, like I mentioned on the Mac there's Command, and on the Windows there's the actual Control key. The key combinations of Control and Z or Command and Z will trigger the undo operation, right? For redo, there's usually the key combination of Control and Y. All right, so we have the VKY here specified. For cut, there's Control and X. All right, so we added that. For copy, there's Control and C. For paste, there's Control and V. Now these are standard. We didn't really make these up. But if you have non-standard operations or operations that are specific to your particular application, you can use a similar approach and create your own key combinations to trigger your particular menu items. Again, for convenience purposes, for power users in particular, right? And not forgetting the select all key, Control and A, for instance, right? And we're going to add a mnemonic to our other menu, our format menu here. Okay. So format menu, since we've already used up F for file, we're going to use the next letter down, and that's typically the approach. So so we're going to use O. So basically the mnemonic combination Alt and O will expand our format menu. And what we're going to do next is, jumping ahead, what we're going to do next basically, after having added all of these mnemonics and accelerators for convenience purposes, all right, we're going to test this out and see what it looks like. So I'm basically going to build. And run this. So once we have these in place, you'll notice based on your source that when you expand it, you'll notice these little shortcut labels next to the items that we've added, the accelerators. All right? And they look a little strange because I'm running things on the Mac, but they look a bit differently on Windows machines. And these actually inform you of the key combinations that will trigger those items directly. And that's taken care of automatically. Also, we notice that our text size menu using the button group works as we expect, since we have all three items linked to the same button group. Only one item of the three that's triggered will be selected at any given time. All right. In addition to that, when we when we press our Alt key, you'll notice that the items, the mnemonic triggers, are in place. So we can hold down Alt and E to expand the Alt and E to expand the edit menu, for instance. And Alt and F to expand the file menu, for instance, and so on. Okay, so those are in place and they're confirmed to be working. So the next thing that we want to take care of would be the addition of our icons. Now, at the beginning of this, we made sure that our images folder, which contained our icons, was placed within the working directory of our project. All right. Now, from here on in, we will modify our constructor for the JMenuItem class, all right, on each of our menu items, and we will basically add a second argument, and the second argument itself will reference the particular GIF within our images folder of our project. Okay. Now, the image icon class is used to wrap that path because basically the JMenuItem constructor is designed to take as its second argument an object of type image, which again is related to the image icon class itself. They're sort of related by generics in that sense. But in a simple case, this entire statement here represents that GIF itself that's going to be assigned to our button. All right, so we're going to do that for every single menu item that we have available. Okay, so we've just added a new icon to our new menu item, and we're going to continue to do that for the other menu items that we have there. So make note of the names of our GIFs and just add them to the associated items themselves. So we're going to continue along, adding close to close, close that GIF to close, save that GIF to save, save underscore as dot GIF to save as, etc. All right. And not forgetting our pop-up menu, so we still want to add those items, those icons to our pop-up menu items as well. All right. So once we've added all of those icons there, we can sort of test this out. Now again, if I sort of added the code a bit too quickly, just feel free to pause the video and transcribe and then continue. But usually these items, the GIFs themselves are named quite appropriately. So so what I mean by that is there's cut.gif for the cut menu item. It's just the case that's different in that case. So you can follow that pattern. The only discrepancy would be under this one, where I just shortened select for select all. Okay. So let's test this out and see what it looks like. I'm going to compile this. And run it. So once these icons are in place, let's just try the pop-up menu first. Once these icons are in place, they sort of add to the, to the effectiveness of identifying these items. But you'll find that their use will come in handy when we get to the toolbar in a bit. So we see the little scissors for cut, the little duplicates for copy, etc. show up. In our menu items themselves, we see these icons in place. All right. So far, so good. Now we're going to work on adding our toolbar. All right. So to work with work with toolbars in Java, we use the J toolbar. So you just need to add that line. You're just going to instantiate that. And right now we're working, if you're unaware, we're still working inside of the constructor of our text editor UI class. All right, so if you're wondering where to put that code, just scroll all the way down to the end of to the end of the code in the constructor, within the constructor, of course, just after our, just after where we set up the mouse listener for our pop-up menu. And we're going to add that new code for our toolbar, right? So we're going to instantiate the toolbar. We're going to call it toolbar with a common T. And the next thing that we do is we add the toolbar to the frame. Now, adding the toolbar to the frame is quite simple. We just specify the toolbar instance, and we also can specify the layout. If we would like the toolbar to be positioned across the top, just under the menu itself, we use border layout.north. That's typically the position of a toolbar, but you can get creative and use border layout.west, border layout.east, or border layout.south if you wish, if you want your toolbar to the left, right, or bottom, respectively. So once we've added the toolbar to the frame itself, we can proceed by adding items to our toolbar. Now, the toolbar items are typically without any labels, and we can safely add that using JButtons instead of JMenu items, right? So we're going to create a new JButton, but the JButton will have no text, just an image icon to represent that particular item in the toolbar. And as you know, toolbars are typically iconified, just as this one up here is. And you'll find that it helps identification if we can add some tooltip text. And we can do that by calling the setTooltipText method on the button's instance itself. So we see here, after we've created our button, called it new button, we can call its setTooltipText method. All right, and within the arguments there, we can set the text that will show up when we hover over the toolbar's button. Right, and we can continue to do this with other items. And of course, after you've set this up, we need to add it to the toolbar. We need to add that button to the toolbar. So it's a simple referencing of the toolbar, calling its add method, and specifying what we're adding, which is the button itself. Right. So we're going to do this repetitively. So I would recommend that you just copy these 3 lines of code, all right, including the comment. Copy those 3 lines of code as it is, and we are going to copy that and paste it over and over again to represent all of the other items that we need to add to the toolbar. We just modify the particular image that it's referencing, as well as the text itself. So here's what I mean. So here's another item. The image that it's referencing is different. This is our open button. The name is different, and our tooltip text is different. So make those 3 modifications as we go ahead. So it's the same three logical statements that's happening that's repeating to populate our toolbar. We create the button, give the button an image, no text. We set a tooltip text value on that button that we've created, and then we add it to the toolbar. All right, so we can do this again for another item, and this item will be our save item. All right, again, we in toolbars typically, for organizational purposes, there are separators, just as we have up here. This little dashed line here is a separator. So we can add separators to our toolbar if we wish by calling the add separator method on the toolbar instance itself, as you see here. All right, so just throw that line of code in, and then we can, after the separator, we can continue adding more buttons. Usually the separators sort of group the buttons together with respect to their purpose and function, right? So right now the separator is just separating the undo and redo operations in the toolbar, right? And we can add another separator for some more items, more items that are more or less unrelated to the undo and redo operations in the toolbar, such as the cut, right, and the copy, right, and paste, of course, and select all. Okay, so transcribe these, and we will see how this renders. Usually it adds to the usability of your applications if you have a quick access toolbar. All right. So once you have these in place, you may want to right click and choose Fix Imports. All right, since I'm using a different strategy, I've already imported all I needed to import. But if you see certain red lines, red squiggly lines under certain classes, then a quick fix would be to right-click and choose Fix Imports. And once you do that, all right, just compile it and run it. And we should see a decent looking text editor application complete with toolbar, items, and tooltips, of course, as well as a pop-up menu, as well as mnemonics that expand the menu items themselves. Let me use the mnemonic itself to expand the file, as well as accelerators next to the menu items. Now, I won't be able to confirm that these accelerators work. The only thing that would indicate this would be the little shortcuts shown next to the menu items that have the accelerators. We will be able to see these accelerators work when we add actual actions or operations to the items themselves through event listeners in a later session. So that's basically it for this lab session. All right, we've basically modified our interface, adding mnemonics for our menus, accelerators for our menu items, and those are mainly for power users. So as long as you know these key combinations, we're able to work a bit quicker because we don't necessarily have to spend time expanding and using the mouse cursor to search through menu items or even sub-menu items, all right, and finding a particular option that you may typically use. In addition to that, we also have a toolbar in place for convenience purposes, all right, and toolbars are usually set up without any labels, all right, and they're set up using iconified items and tooltips, just in case the user isn't sure about what the item really means. And you can see here, they're regular buttons that we can click around and so on. Again, a point to note is that these toolbars are really containers themselves, so they can hold other items, other GUI items other than buttons. They can even hold text fields, for instance, and so forth. All right. So that's it for this lab session. If you have any questions, post it to the group.